This is the last signal radio. If you're hearing me, it means you're still here. You're still holding on to something real. But what is real anymore when the world you knew has started disappearing? People woke up today and didn't know who they were. Names, faces, decades of their own history gone. They look in the mirror and see strangers. Words that used to come easily now feel foreign. Language itself is slipping. How do you describe yourself when the words vanish with the memories? I've heard stories from everywhere. Families can't recognize each other. Neighbors are avoiding one another because their faces feel unfamiliar. People are trying to complete the simplest tasks: make coffee, unlock doors, turn on phones. And it's impossible. Everyday objects, places they've lived in for years, feel foreign. The world has become a stranger. The streets are wrong. The buildings are wrong. Cities that should feel familiar now feel like someone else's imagination. People are wandering, searching for threads to hold on to, but everything familiar is unraveling. People are forgetting how to communicate. Instructions, warnings, government alerts, they make no sense. The words exist, but they are meaningless. Panic is spreading faster than anyone can respond. People look around at each other and don't even know who they're seeing. I've heard stories that freeze the blood. A woman in Chicago couldn't remember her daughter's number, and when she called, the voice she heard didn't feel like her daughter's. A man in Dallas stood in front of his own front door, unsure if it was even his house. He couldn't remember how long he'd lived there. His life, his memories, erased in an instant. And it's happening everywhere. People forget who they love, who they trust, what they believe in. The smallest details are gone, and with them, the foundation of everything we've built. If you are hearing me, hold on to whatever you can remember. Say it aloud if you can. Remember the names, the faces, the feelings, the small details that still exist in your mind. Every memory is a thread connecting us back to each other. Every fragment matters. We don't know why this is happening. No one does. Some say it's random, some say it's deliberate. Right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is staying alive and staying human. Sharing what we remember, keeping those fragments alive while the rest slips away. People are still reaching out, sharing what they remember. Stories of confusion, fear, and loss. Stories of homes that feel like strangers' houses, of faces that no longer belong to anyone. And through it all, one question keeps coming up. What do we hold on to when everything else has been erased? I will stay on the air as long as I can. I will speak, because if even one person can remember a name, a place, a feeling, then the world is not entirely lost. If you are hearing me now, speak of your memories. Share them. Hold them alive. The world is breaking faster than we can understand. People are waking up to faces they no longer recognize. Children stare at their parents with confusion, their eyes searching for the familiar spark of recognition that should be there. And it isn't. Partners no longer see each other in the same way, and the intimacy of shared history has vanished overnight. Families, once the bedrock of daily life, are splintering under the weight of forgotten names and erased experiences. Entire neighborhoods feel like strangers have moved in overnight. Homes that should feel warm and safe now feel alien, as if the very walls are whispering a language no one remembers. I am hearing from people everywhere, from corners of the globe where panic is mounting and confusion is becoming the new normal. A woman walked into her own kitchen and froze, staring at the appliances as though they were relics from another planet. Every detail, the refrigerator, the stove, the countertop, was both familiar and incomprehensible. She couldn't remember how to make tea, how to boil water, how to even operate the devices she had used for decades. Her home was her anchor, and now the anchor had vanished. A man tried to call his wife this morning, only to realize he didn't remember her number, didn't even remember her face. He said he felt like he had been erased from his own life, like he was drifting through a world that had been rewritten without his consent. The names, the faces, the laughter and arguments, all gone, leaving behind a void that nothing could fill. People describe this sensation as more than forgetting. It is being unmade from within, erased from the context of one's own existence. The routines we once took for granted, the small patterns of everyday life that gave shape and comfort to our days, no longer exist. People cannot remember how to cook meals they once made instinctively, how to navigate streets they have walked for decades, how to read the labels on products they have used for years. Simple tasks, pouring a cup of coffee, locking a door, making a call, turning on a light, have become exercises in terror. Grocery stores, offices, schools, they are still there physically, but they have become alien landscapes. They exist in the world, yet the meaning that gave them structure has disappeared. I am hearing from people wandering through streets, their eyes wide, bodies tense, moving in loops because the directions they knew have vanished. They are panicked, lost, trying desperately to make sense of what used to be ordinary. The familiar is no longer familiar. The intersections they crossed every day now feel like traps. Landmarks that once guided them now mock them with the cruel familiarity of recognition that carries no meaning. A man in New York told me he walked past his office building 3 times before realizing it was the place he had worked for 15 years. The doorway, the windows, even the logo above the entrance were visible, but the memory of what it represented, of what he did there, had been stolen. The fear is spreading faster than anyone can measure. People are frightened not only by what they have lost, but by what they cannot even grasp. When memory itself collapses, the ground beneath the world shifts. Parents cannot protect their children because they do not remember the lessons they once taught. Teachers cannot guide students because they have forgotten the knowledge themselves. Friends cannot console one another because they cannot remember what it meant to be friends. And the very air of the world feels hostile, alien, as though reality itself is turning against those who once understood it. And yet, amid this devastation, the stories keep coming. Each report, each call, each description of confusion is a signal of life, a thread of consciousness trying to survive the erasure. People are reaching out, trying to connect, trying to anchor themselves through shared fragments of what was. A woman in Paris described holding on to the scent of bread baking in the morning as the only connection to her childhood. A man in Sydney recalled the rhythm of a song he used to play on repeat, and for a moment he could feel himself again. These fragments, though tiny and fragile, are the only bridges across the void, the only proof that life continues even as the world forgets itself. Every day, the scale of this loss expands. Names, faces, skills, routines, each vanishing faster than we can track. People move like ghosts through the places they once called home, searching desperately for remnants of the lives they can no longer access. They reach for memories that are not there, for connections that have been severed, for a past that has been rewritten while they slept. And in the emptiness, the world feels like it is collapsing inward, collapsing into silence, into a void that swallows everything we believed about who we are, what we know, and the life we once shared. Some are desperately trying to hold on to fragments of what was. A faint smell, a loaf of bread baking, wet earth after rain, a perfume long forgotten, can trigger a memory just for a moment. A melody drifting through a city street, a song hummed by a stranger, a familiar gesture from a loved one, and suddenly decades return in flashes. Laughter, arguments, quiet evenings, mornings full of promise. But these moments are fleeting, fragile. They vanish almost as soon as they appear, leaving only the ache of what has been lost. People clutch these fragments as if they are lifelines, as if grasping them tightly enough can anchor them to a world that no longer exists. Others have nothing. They move through the world like ghosts, bodies intact but hollowed by the absence of memory. Eyes wide, they search for faces, places, and routines that once gave their lives meaning, but everything is unfamiliar. Kitchens, living rooms, playgrounds, streets they've walked every day, all feel foreign, threatening. They reach for the familiar and find only emptiness. Every step is tentative. Every interaction is a puzzle. The simplest act, walking down the street, greeting a neighbor, becomes a challenge, a confrontation with uncertainty. Confusion is everywhere, spreading like a virus. Arguments erupt over details that no one can agree on. A tree that once provided shade for children now becomes a point of contention. One neighbor insists it never existed. Another swears it has always stood there. A building, once painted a comforting color, is now recalled differently by those who live nearby. Without shared memories, reality itself becomes contested. Facts dissolve. The very ground under people's feet feels unstable. Small disputes, born from contradictory recollections, quickly escalate into violence. Fear and frustration spread faster than the memory loss itself, infecting entire communities, leaving chaos in its wake. And yet, the world does not simply collapse into despair. People begin to invent their own histories to fill the gaps left by vanished memory. Some cling to the fragments of truth they can recall, holding them like sacred talismans. Others rely on imagination, desperation, rumor, or wishful thinking to construct a reality that makes sense to them. These reconstructions are inconsistent, contradictory, but they are necessary. They provide a semblance of order, a narrative to guide daily life, even if it is flawed. Entire communities start to fracture under these competing realities. Streets that once formed cohesive neighborhoods now house people who live in entirely different worlds, each convinced that their version of the past is correct. On one side of the street, a festival is remembered in vivid detail. Across the road, it never happened, replaced by an invented holiday of their own design. One group remembers a building being destroyed years ago. Another insists it has always stood. Every individual, every household, every block becomes a custodian of a unique, often conflicting reality. And everyone believes they are right. There is no neutral ground. When reality is defined by memory, belief becomes absolute. The streets are filled with tension, suspicion, and quiet fury. People watch each other, testing reactions, trying to see if anyone else shares their recollections. Disagreements escalate, sometimes into shouting, sometimes into fists, sometimes into destruction. Fear spreads through the community faster than any physical danger. and the anxiety feeds itself. One person's certainty becomes another person's rage. Even shared spaces, like markets, schools, or offices, have become arenas of conflict. What should be common knowledge is now disputed territory. A single word, a shared ritual, a remembered event can trigger debates that spiral out of control. People no longer know what to trust. Not their eyes, not their neighbors, not the places they inhabit. And when no one can agree on reality, chaos is inevitable. Yet, amid the fear and fragmentation, there are glimpses of resilience. Some people are learning to navigate the fractured world by recognizing the patterns of memory loss. They catalog fragments, share stories, and try to create pockets of agreement. These small groups form fragile networks, islands of continuity in a sea of confusion. They mark landmarks that survive collectively, repeat songs that trigger shared memories, and document details that anchor them to a coherent version of the world. Still, these efforts are fragile. Each day brings new lapses, new contradictions, new gaps that threaten the tenuous connections people have built. The line between reality and invention blurs further with every passing hour. And yet, it is in these efforts, the sharing, the remembering, the small acts of preservation, that humanity refuses to vanish entirely. In this new world, memory is power. To hold on to fragments is to hold on to identity, to maintain connection, to assert existence against the tide of erasure. And for those with nothing, every sight, every sound, every gesture becomes a desperate search for meaning in a reality that no longer provides certainty. The struggle is not just to survive physically, but to survive cognitively, emotionally, and spiritually. To resist being rewritten entirely. Through it all, I keep listening. That is what I do now. I listen to the fear in people's voices when they realize the past is slipping away. I listen to the confusion when they try to explain something they can almost remember but can't quite reach. I listen to the heartbreak of someone realizing that the person standing in front of them should mean everything, and yet means nothing at all. And beneath all of it, I hear the same thing again and again. The desperation to remember, to hold on, to not disappear entirely. I hear people trying to reconnect in whatever ways they still can. Some describe walking for hours just to find someone who feels familiar. Others stay in one place, hoping the right face will pass by and trigger something buried deep inside. People are reaching out blindly, searching for others who still carry fragments of the past. That is what we cling to now. Not certainty, not knowledge, just the threads that still tie us to one another. If you are listening right now, understand this clearly. What you hold in your mind is not just yours anymore. Your memories are no longer private possessions. They are survival tools. Share them. Speak them out loud. Tell someone what you remember, even if it feels insignificant. A street name, a routine, a song, a smell, a habit. Every detail matters. Every fragment matters more than you realize. This is how we stay connected. This is how we remain human in a world that is actively forgetting itself. People keep asking if this will ever stop. If memory will return on its own. If there is a reset point, a moment when everything snaps back into place. I don't have those answers. No one does. What I do know is that silence makes this worse. Isolation accelerates the erasure. the more we stop speaking, the easier it becomes to disappear. This is not just a story of loss. It feels like one, and it hurts like one. But it is more than that. It is a story of persistence, of refusal, of people who are still trying, even when trying feels pointless. People are still searching for meaning. People are still writing things down. People are still teaching each other what they remember, even when they aren't sure it's correct. They are choosing effort over surrender. Families are broken, yes. Cities are fractured. Histories are unstable. But even now, people are forming new bonds based on shared fragments. Someone remembers a festival. Someone else remembers the food. Someone else remembers the music. Together, they build something close enough to truth to stand on. It may not be perfect. It may not even be accurate. But it is human. And so must we be. We cannot let the vanishing memories consume us completely. We cannot allow ourselves to become empty vessels waiting to be filled by whatever replaces the past. Because there is a question that keeps coming back. One that scientists and neuropsychologists are starting to whisper, and it should terrify all of us. What if our memories aren't just disappearing? What if they are being rewritten? What if this has already happened before, and we simply don't remember it? If that is true, then remembering isn't just resistance, it's defiance. So we keep going, we keep talking, we keep listening, we keep piecing together what we can, fragment by fragment, voice by voice. We find each other in the gaps. We verify what overlaps. We hold on to the patterns that repeat across different minds. And through those fragile connections, we preserve something that cannot be fully erased. As long as there is someone willing to speak and someone willing to listen, continuity still exists. And as long as continuity exists, humanity has not ended. The world is unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. The memory loss isn't just personal anymore. It's sweeping across every corner of society. Schools can't function because teachers don't remember lessons. Offices are deserted or chaotic because people can't remember how to do their jobs. Governments issue orders, emergency protocols, warnings, but no one understands them anymore. The instructions exist, but the meaning is gone. Cities are erupting into chaos. Streets fill with people arguing over things they can't remember correctly. What existed, what didn't, who owns what. Two neighbors fight over whether a building ever existed or was built yesterday. People attack each other for histories they cannot prove. Fear is spreading faster than fire. I've heard stories from callers who can't find their children, their partners, or their parents. They wander through streets they once knew, calling names they no longer remember. Some come across others who remember the same fragment of a street, a store, or a school, but in completely different ways. One person swears the school was 3 stories, another swears it was 5. They argue, and the arguments turn violent. Technology is failing too. People can't figure out how to use devices. Phones, computers, even simple tools become meaningless in hands that have forgotten their purpose. Electricity still flows, buildings stand, but the people inside cannot interact with the world they created. The misinformation spreads almost instantly. As people forget, they fill in the blanks with guesswork, imagination, and rumor. Myths replace memory. Legends form overnight. Communities fracture into conflicting versions of reality. One block remembers one history. The next block recalls something else entirely. The city becomes a patchwork of realities that cannot coexist peacefully. People are terrified. Some wander alone, lost and silent. Others band together, desperate for any connection, even if it's fragile or temporary. They cling to each other, holding on to the fragments that remain, sharing stories to keep reality from slipping completely away. I need you to remember this. Even as the world falls apart, what you remember matters. Speak it. Share it. Your memories are threads connecting us to each other. Every detail is a lifeline. Every fragment you hold on to is resistance against the erasure sweeping across humanity. I hear the panic in the voices of people calling in. I hear despair, confusion, heartbreak, and I hear the faint glimmers of hope. People are still trying. People are still searching. People are still speaking to each other. That is how we survive. That is how we remain human. Something is changing. I can feel it, and I can hear it in the stories people are calling in with. This isn't just chaos. It isn't random. There is a pattern to what's disappearing, a strange order to the erasure that I cannot fully explain yet. Some people wake up and lose everything. Their families, their jobs, their memories of their own names. But others just blocks away, remember parts of the past with crystal clarity. There's no consistency, no predictability, and that inconsistency itself feels deliberate. People are calling in, describing moments that flicker in and out of existence. A man from San Francisco said he walked past a bakery he'd been visiting for years, and suddenly remembered an event he thought had never happened. A birthday party from 15 years ago that was erased from everyone else's memory. He doesn't know why it came back to him. Another caller in London told me she smelled a particular perfume on the bus, and a flood of memories returned. A day at a concert, a conversation she couldn't place, decades of life she thought had been wiped clean. These flashes are brief, fragments, pieces that don't fit into any timeline we recognize. But they're real. They exist, and they matter. It's terrifying to think that our memories, the very things that define us, are being manipulated. There are people remembering events that never happened, or at least events that no one else can confirm. Entire neighborhoods are developing their own versions of history. One block insists a park never existed. Another swears the park has always been there. These conflicting recollections are not small disagreements. They are seeds of chaos. People are fighting, defending realities that cannot coexist. And still, some fragments remain intact. Some memories refuse to vanish, and in those pockets, a strange sense of order begins to emerge. I'm seeing patterns, small things, subtle things, but consistent. People tend to lose memories related to the everyday, the routines, the mundane, but often retain memories tied to strong emotions. Fear, joy, grief, love. A mother may forget her child's face, but remember the terror she felt during the child's birth. A man may forget the office he has worked in for 20 years, but remember the exhilaration of a first kiss, or the sadness of a funeral. It's selective. It's surgical. And the flashes, those fragments, are not always private. They leak into the minds of others. People are reporting visions, fleeting impressions, even images that appear unbidden. One caller said she saw a recurring image of a city she had never visited, but it felt familiar, like it existed in some forgotten memory. Another described hearing a voice in her head, repeating a story she didn't remember living, but felt compelled to acknowledge. listeners everywhere are experiencing the same thing. Threads of memory crossing from one mind to another, creating a web of shared fragments in a world otherwise hollowed out. The implications are staggering. This is no longer a simple loss of memory. This is a living, evolving phenomenon, one that may have intent. There is an intelligence shaping what is kept and what is erased. I don't know if it is natural, supernatural, or something else entirely. I can only report what I see, what I hear, and what people are sending me. And in every report, there is the same sense, a terrifying suggestion that humanity is being rewritten, piece by piece, through cognition itself. It is frightening. And yet, amid the fear, there is a strange kind of hope. Every flash of memory, every fragment that comes back, is proof that not all is lost, that somewhere inside us, the truth persists. Some people are holding on to key moments, names, places, songs, faces, that might form a backbone for reconstructing what we have lost. If we can map these fragments, track them, we might find the structure behind the erasure, understand the rules, and perhaps even fight back against whatever is doing this. I'm documenting everything I can. Every story, every call, every fragment I hear becomes part of a growing map of memory. Names, dates, sensations, smells, melodies, all of it might be vital. Some fragments contradict each other, forming impossible timelines, but even contradictions tell us something. Patterns are emerging in the chaos. We can see sequences in what is erased and what remains. We can start to predict what might vanish next, and maybe what might survive. But the world outside continues to crumble. Cities are still falling into confusion. People are inventing histories to replace what they have lost. Some live in parallel realities, each convinced that their version of events is true. In certain neighborhoods, myths are spreading faster than facts ever did. Entire generations are forgetting who they are, and in their place, something else is taking shape. Something that doesn't belong to any individual, but to the collective mind, reshaped and manipulated. I need you to hold on to what you can. Record it. Speak it aloud. Write it down. Every fragment matters. If you're listening to me right now, remember this. You are the keeper of memory. Your recollections, no matter how small or fleeting, are the bridge between what has been erased and what can be restored. And yet, even as we hold on, even as we search for patterns, the uncertainty gnaws at us. We don't know how long this will last. We don't know the scope of what is happening. The flashes could stop. The fragments could vanish. We could be left with nothing. But as long as one person remembers, as long as even a single fragment survives, there is a thread connecting us to the world we knew. This is why I broadcast. This is why I speak into the airwaves. Every story I receive, every memory I document, becomes part of the resistance against the erasure. I cannot save everyone. I cannot restore all that has been lost, but I can give voice to the fragments that survive. I can connect them, like threads weaving a fragile tapestry of human history. We are in the midst of something unprecedented. The patterns are subtle, the fragments fleeting, but they exist. They are proof that we are not completely erased, that somewhere, hidden in the chaos, the truth still exists. And as long as we notice, as long as we listen, as long as we hold on to these flashes of memory, we can begin to understand, to 𝗕𝗿𝗀𝗻𝗆, and maybe even to reclaim what has been taken from us. Even in the middle of this chaos, some fragments of memory persist. They are small, fleeting, almost impossible to grasp, but they are there. A melody drifting through a city street brings back a decade of life. A familiar smell, bread baking, rain on pavement, a perfume, triggers images and emotions that people thought were gone forever. These glimmers of the past are brief, unpredictable, and yet they are the only proof that not all of humanity has been erased. I've heard from people who remember moments that don't exist for anyone else. A man called from Paris, saying he remembered the sound of his father's laughter on a rainy afternoon 15 years ago. He can't explain why it comes to him, why it lingers in his mind when everything else has been wiped. Another listener in Tokyo said that she smelled a particular flower and suddenly recalled walking down a street she no longer knows exists, holding someone's hand she can't name. These flashes are terrifying because they remind people of what they have lost, and comforting because they are evidence that the past still lives somewhere, somehow. Neighborhoods are starting to fracture. People cling to the memories that survive for them, but those memories don't always match with anyone else's. Entire communities are forming around shared fragments, but each group remembers a slightly different reality. One street insists a bakery always existed on the corner. Another remembers it as a park. These fragments give structure to the chaos, but they also spark conflict. People fight to defend their memories, even if they contradict reality for everyone else. I've spoken to people who are building rituals around these glimmers. They repeat songs, they light candles, they try to recreate experiences that flash in their minds for just a moment. They are desperate to anchor themselves to something stable, to prove to themselves that they are still who they were. And in some cases, these small rituals are working. They bring clarity, a thread of continuity through the fog. But not all of it is comforting. Some flashes bring horror. People recall events in fragments, but can't place them. A woman in Berlin remembered a tragedy from her childhood, her memory vivid and horrifying. But no one else recalls it. She cannot confirm whether it happened, or whether her mind is creating a phantom. In a world without collective memory, these fragments can isolate as much as they connect. People are clinging to realities that may exist only in their own minds, and yet they are all that remain. Even more troubling are the overlapping memories. Two neighbors remember the same event differently. One remembers it as joyous, the other as catastrophic. They argue, they shout, sometimes violently, because in a world where memory defines reality, disagreement is not a difference of opinion. It is a war. And everywhere, these micro-battles are spreading like wildfire. Cities are fracturing into miniature realities, each dictated by the surviving memories of the people within them. The patterns are becoming clearer. Memories tied to strong emotion survive longer. Love, fear, grief, joy. They cling to the mind even as mundane knowledge is stripped away. But these flashes are unpredictable. Sometimes a memory will vanish as soon as someone shares it. Other times, it spreads, infecting others, as if one person's recollection is enough to restore it in another's mind. There is a rhythm, a method hidden in the chaos, but it is subtle and difficult to interpret. I've heard from people who believe they are receiving guidance from these flashes. One man says he dreams of a city that doesn't exist, yet the images guide him to a safe place he wouldn't have found otherwise. A woman in New York describes hearing a voice in her mind, repeating lines from a song she can't fully remember. The song seems to hold instructions, directions, a clue to surviving this unraveling world. It's as if the fragments themselves are alive, sending signals, shaping behavior, or connecting people in ways we can't understand. And here is what I have realized. Every glimmer of memory is precious. Every fragment, no matter how small or contradictory, is a lifeline. These flashes are not just remnants of the past. They are keys to survival. Without them, people drift completely into confusion. With them, there is hope. And yet, hope comes with danger. People who hold strong fragments are powerful in this new reality, not because of wealth or influence, but because of the memories they control. Entire neighborhoods are being shaped by the recollections of a few, and where memories conflict, chaos follows. I need you to remember this, whoever you are listening to right now. If a memory comes back to you, do not dismiss it. Speak it aloud. Share it with others. Record it. Write it down. Repeat it. Every fragment you preserve is a thread connecting humanity back to itself. These glimmers may be the difference between survival and total erasure. They are proof that the world that was still exists somewhere inside us. We are not powerless. Even as society splinters, even as cities fracture into conflicting realities, the surviving memories give us a chance. They are a map through the chaos, a way to understand what is being lost, and perhaps to reclaim what can be restored. And we must hold on to them with everything we have, because if we lose even these flashes, we lose the last connection to the world we knew. People are still reaching out to me. Every story, every report is another piece of the puzzle. I am collecting them, documenting them, holding them together in these broadcasts. And even as the world around us falls apart, even as familiar faces vanish into strangers, these glimmers remind us that not all is lost, that the past is not entirely gone, that somewhere, buried in our minds, fragments survive. We are still here. We are still fighting. And as long as we remember together, there is a thread connecting us, a lifeline back to the world we are trying to salvage. Every flash matters. Every fragment matters. And the more we share them, the stronger the connection becomes. I can feel it now, stronger than ever. The world is not silent, not completely. Even as memories vanish, even as cities fracture and people drift like ghosts through streets they no longer recognize, there is a hum, a pulse, a thread connecting us. It is the voices of those who still remember, fragments of thought and sensation, fleeting glimpses of the lives we all once shared. And I am listening. Every day, I receive reports from people desperate to hold on to reality. They describe déjà vu, flashes of erased decades, visions that cannot be explained. A woman in Lisbon says she walked past a fountain she's never seen before, yet she remembers standing there in another lifetime. A man in Chicago recalls a festival that no one else seems to have attended. People cheering, music floating through the air, smells of food and flowers, every detail vivid, impossible to verify, yet undeniable. These are not isolated incidents. They are happening all over the world, and each one is a lifeline. I am speaking to you now because the connection matters. Every fragment of memory shared, every story told, every detail recounted becomes a thread in a web holding humanity together. If you are listening to me, then you are part of this network. You are the voice, the witness, the keeper of memory. When the world forgets, we must remember each other. There are patterns emerging in the chaos. Some memories persist in clusters, overlapping across neighborhoods, across continents. A melody remembered in New York may appear in someone else's mind in Mumbai. A smell, a word, a fragment of an event seems to resonate in multiple people at once. It's as if the memory itself is alive, moving, connecting us in ways we cannot fully grasp. And as these connections grow, they form a map of the lost world, a fragile skeleton of continuity amidst the collapse. But it is not just comforting. There is terror in these voices, too. People recall horrors that cannot be confirmed, tragedies erased from collective awareness. They panic when they realize no one else shares their recollections. Families are splitting apart, communities are clashing, because the fragments do not always match. What one person remembers, another may forget completely, or remember differently. Conflicting memories have become weapons, and disputes erupt over realities that cannot coexist. Still, I continue to speak because these voices matter. Even when memories contradict, even when they seem impossible, they are proof that the world is not completely gone. Each story I hear, each detail recorded, becomes a piece of the puzzle. We may not know the full picture yet, but the fragments themselves are enough to guide us, enough to remind us that we are still here. People are beginning to reach out to each other through these fragments. They are forming fragile networks, communities built not on shared spaces, but on shared memory. One neighborhood in Berlin remembers a school that no one else in the city recalls. Across town, another group remembers the same school differently. And yet, connections form. Tiny bridges between these fractured realities, allowing people to communicate, to find common ground, even as their world is falling apart. There is something else happening. Listeners are reporting strange impressions, whispers in their minds that feel like guidance. A man in Cairo hears voices repeating a poem he doesn't fully remember, yet it leads him to safety. A woman in Tokyo describes flashes of visions that show her roots through a city she no longer recognizes, guiding her away from danger. These fragments seem intentional, purposeful, as if the memory itself is trying to lead us, to preserve what matters most. I am collecting these stories, documenting every detail. Names, places, smells, melodies, emotions, every fragment may be essential. The patterns are subtle, almost imperceptible, but they exist. Some memories are reinforced through repetition, while others vanish if ignored. The act of remembering together, of speaking aloud and sharing, seems to strengthen the thread connecting us all. And yet, there is fragility. The world outside continues to crumble. Streets are filled with confusion and fear. Communities fracture into competing realities. Violence erupts over conflicting recollections. Technology fails, governance collapses, and the ordinary structures of life are meaningless to those who cannot remember how they work. In the midst of this, every connection, every shared memory becomes precious beyond measure. I need you to understand this. If a memory comes to you, if a flash appears, if you remember a face, a song, a smell, a day that no one else seems to recall, hold on to it. Speak it aloud. Share it. Write it down. Every fragment you preserve strengthens the network, strengthens the map of what has been lost and keeps humanity from dissolving entirely. We are no longer just individuals trying to survive. We are witnesses, keepers of what remains. Each voice matters. Each memory matters. When you share it, you are creating continuity where there was none, stitching together a world that is being rewritten before our eyes. The void is real. The erasure is real. But so are we. Our memories, our fragments, our voices, they are the last signal, the final thread connecting us to the world we once knew. And as long as we remember together, as long as we share what survives, we are not lost. We are the living archive, the fragile continuity, the proof that humanity endures even when memory itself is under siege. I need to talk about something that has been forming quietly beneath everything we've been documenting. Until now, we've focused on what has been lost, the fragments, the flashes, the chaos. But there is another possibility emerging, and it's far more disturbing than simple erasure. What if memory is not just disappearing? What if it is being replaced? Over the past few days, patterns have become too precise to ignore. The way memories vanish, the way certain fragments return, the way emotions persist while facts dissolve. This is not the behavior of a system collapsing randomly. This looks engineered, structured, designed. Neuropsychologists and neuroscientists who are still able to think clearly are sending in theories, fragments of analysis, half-finished models. They are all circling the same idea. Memory is not a passive archive. It is an active architecture, a system that builds reality moment by moment. And that architecture appears to be under reconstruction. The human brain does not store memory like a file cabinet. It rebuilds the past every time we remember it. Each recollection is a reconstruction, not a replay, which means something terrifying. If the reconstruction process is altered, the past itself becomes editable. That is the theory gaining ground right now. The reports suggest that long-term memory is not simply being deleted. In many cases, it is being overwritten with placeholders. People don't always experience emptiness. They experience certainty. Certainty about things that never happened. False histories that feel authentic. Emotional responses attached to events that don't exist. This is not amnesia. This is revision. Some listeners report remembering entire childhoods that no one else recognizes. Others swear by political borders, wars, disasters, or technologies that never existed in any shared record. These are not hallucinations. These memories are internally consistent, structured, detailed, which raises a question that no one wants to ask out loud. What if this has already happened before? What if the memories we think are original are already rewritten? Neuroscientists point out something unsettling. When a memory is altered successfully, the brain cannot detect the change. There is no internal alarm, no sensation of loss. The new memory feels as real as the old one ever did. The person experiencing it has no way to know the difference. If that process is happening now, on a massive scale, then we may not be witnessing the beginning of the event. We may be witnessing a phase of it. There are inconsistencies appearing in the fragments people share, overlaps that don't align, timelines that almost fit but not quite, events that seem to have been smoothed over, simplified, made more efficient. Scientists suggest this could be a form of cognitive compression. a way of reducing the complexity of human history, removing contradictions, removing excess, leaving behind a streamlined version of reality that is easier to maintain, easier to control, easier to stabilize. And if that's true, then memory loss is not the goal. Memory optimization is. Some memories survive because they reinforce identity. Others vanish because they complicate it. Emotional memories persist because they anchor behavior. Mundane knowledge disappears because it can be relearned or replaced. Which brings us to the most unsettling idea yet. What if the memories returning to people, the flashes, the dreams, the melodies, are not glitches? What if they are rejected edits? What if the human mind is resisting the rewrite? Listeners describe the same sensations repeatedly. A feeling that something is wrong but cannot be articulated. A sense of déjà vu without context. An emotional reaction that has no clear cause. These may be fragments of the original architecture pushing back against the new structure being imposed. The brain remembers how reality used to feel, even when it cannot remember why. And then there is this broadcast. There is growing speculation that spoken memory, shared memory, behaves differently than internal memory. That hearing someone else describe a fragment activates neural pathways that bypass the altered reconstruction process. In other words, hearing memories may restore access to parts of the mind that have been sealed. This could explain why people report clarity while listening. Why do fragments return during these transmissions? Why imagery, sensations, and flashes intensify when memory is spoken aloud rather than recalled silently? Which forces me to confront something I cannot ignore anymore. What if this signal is not just documenting memory loss? What if it is interfering with the rewrite? And here is the cliff edge we are standing on right now. If memories can be rewritten without our awareness, if false histories can feel indistinguishable from real ones, if identity itself can be restructured through cognition, then how much of who you are right now is original? How much of what you remember today was already edited before you ever noticed something was wrong? And the most terrifying question of all, if this process succeeds, will anyone left even realize that something was taken? Because a perfect rewrite leaves no witnesses, unless memory itself fights back, unless fragments survive, unless voices keep speaking, unless someone keeps broadcasting continuity into the void. That is why this matters. That is why every fragment matters. That is why this signal must continue. If memory is being rewritten in real time, then remembering together may be the only way to detect the change at all. I don't know how deep this goes. I don't know how long it's been happening. And I don't know whether the memories we are trying to preserve are the first version or the last remaining one. But I do know this. If we stop remembering together, we won't even know what we've lost. This is the last signal radio. And right now, memory itself may be the battlefield. The world is no longer uniform. The streets, the cities, the neighborhoods, they are fractured. Reality itself is splitting apart. People are living in parallel versions of the same world, each convinced that their memories are the true ones. And because memory defines reality now, these parallel worlds clash. I've been documenting the stories as they come in, and the patterns are horrifying. In one city, two families argue over the layout of their own neighborhood. One insists a park existed where another remembers a supermarket. Another swears a bridge fell years ago. The other claims it was never built. They fight because their experiences cannot reconcile. because the fragments of their memories are all they have left to define truth. People are inventing histories just to make sense of what they cannot remember. One neighborhood has rewritten its entire past. Festivals, holidays, even the people who lived there are being reimagined to fill gaps. In another city, a block insists their streets are completely different from official maps. Governments issue statements, but these are meaningless. The instructions make no sense to those whose memories have been altered. Order is impossible. Chaos becomes the only constant. And yet, amid the chaos, some fragments survive. Small pockets of people retain overlapping memories, enough to anchor them to each other and to the world that existed before. These people are becoming beacons, communities forming around the fragments that persist. But even these pockets are fragile. Conflicting recollections can erupt into violence at any moment. Entire neighborhoods are at war with themselves over what is real. I've heard reports from multiple cities describing bizarre behaviors. People are building ritualistic routines to anchor themselves in reality. They repeat songs, recite lists, memorize routes, retrace old steps. They do it to prevent the fragments from slipping away. But these rituals are inconsistent. One person's anchor contradicts another's, creating tension, confrontation, sometimes bloodshed. And it's not just physical spaces that are fracturing. Beliefs, identities, even entire cultural memories are splitting. A group may believe in a historical event that never happened. Another group believes the exact opposite. Holidays, stories, local legends, they are rewritten in real time by collective memory and imagination. There is no standard reality, only versions that overlap and conflict. I hear the panic in the voices reaching me. People are terrified that the world they remember is disappearing forever, and worse, they fear it's being replaced with something they cannot even recognize. There's anger, too, confusion, despair. And then there are those who embrace their new realities, convinced that their invented histories are the only truth. These conflicting beliefs are dangerous, because when memory defines reality, the fight for truth becomes a fight for survival. Even across long distances, fragments interact in strange ways. A melody remembered in one city may appear as a flash in another, an image, a sensation, a smell. These fragments are crossing invisible borders, like signals sent across the fractured landscape of memory. People report visions of events they do not remember living, but that match someone else's account in a distant city. It is proof that memory itself is alive, moving, connecting, and sometimes colliding. And yet, as horrifying as all this is, there is hope in the fragments that survive. If we can preserve and share these fragments, we may be able to create continuity amidst the fractured realities. That is why I broadcast. That is why this signal exists. Every story, every memory reported, every fragment shared keeps a thread of humanity alive. It is a fragile thread, but it is stronger than forgetting. We are in uncharted territory. Parallel realities are forming everywhere, conflicts erupting, communities splintering. The old rules of society, governance, education, family, law, are meaningless when memories diverge. And yet the human instinct to survive and to connect persists. People are reaching out, creating networks, documenting fragments, sharing stories. They are building continuity where the world itself cannot. This is the battleground now. Not streets, not governments, not armies. Memory. Control over what people remember is control over what they believe, what they act on, who they are. And as the world fractures, those who can hold on to shared fragments have power. Even small fragments matter. One remembered song, one shared image, one recalled story can anchor people in the same reality, preventing total collapse. If you are listening right now, do not underestimate what you remember. Every detail matters. Every fragment matters. Write it down. Speak it aloud. Share it with someone else. Every memory preserved is a seed that can help reconstruct the world, or at least prevent it from being lost entirely. And still, the question hangs over all of us. If memory can be rewritten, if realities can fracture and diverge, how do we know which fragments are true? Which memories belong to the world that existed, and which have already been altered? The answer is unclear. But what is clear is that we cannot stop trying. If we let these fragments vanish, if we let fractured realities become isolated, then truth itself may disappear. And with it, the last remnants of humanity's shared world. This is the last signal radio. I am still here. As long as you are listening, as long as we share what we remember, we are keeping the world alive. Even in its fractured state, even in its contradictions, even in its chaos, we are not completely gone. The fragments survive, and as long as they do, hope survives too. Everything is unraveling faster than we can track. Cities are unrecognizable. Streets I once knew now feel alien. Governments no longer exist in any meaningful way. Schools, businesses, families, these structures that once held society together have crumbled under the weight of collective forgetfulness. The world has become a chaotic reflection of itself. Each fragment of memory, a fragile island in an ocean of confusion. People are inventing realities just to survive. Entire neighborhoods claim histories that cannot coexist. Festivals that never happened are celebrated as if they are ancient traditions. Buildings are remembered that were never built, and entire blocks vanish from collective recollection. Arguments break out over realities that do not overlap, and violence is erupting everywhere. The streets are dangerous, not just because of human conflict, but because reality itself is inconsistent. Sidewalks appear in one version of memory and disappear in another. Roads twist, buildings shift, familiar landmarks vanish. What you see may not match what your neighbor remembers. And survival depends on navigating both. And yet, even as society fractures, there are fragments of continuity. Melodies, smells, fleeting images, and recurring dreams are anchoring people to what remains. I hear stories of people who find a street, a park, or a building in a fragment of memory and use it to guide others. People who cling to these flashes of reality are building small networks, pockets of shared knowledge in the chaos. It's tenuous, fragile, but it is hope. I hear you. You are listening. That matters. Every memory you hold on to matters. Speak it aloud. Share it. Preserve it. Even the smallest fragment may be the thread that connects you, and all of us, to the world we are losing. It may be the difference between continuity and total erasure. Neuroscientists and neuropsychologists continue to warn us. Memory loss is not random. It is selective, structured. perhaps intelligent. Some fragments are preserved because they anchor identity. Others vanish because they complicate the narrative of the rewritten world. The flashes, the dreams, the recurring melodies, these may not be glitches. They may be resistant. Evidence that the human mind is fighting back against the rewrite, protecting what it recognizes as essential. We do not know the full scope. Some question whether the world has already been rewritten before we even noticed. Are the memories we trust now the first truth, or a second, third, or fourth iteration? If memory can be rewritten without our awareness, then the very foundation of who we are, the truth we hold in our minds, may be an illusion. But illusions, as fragile as they are, can still guide us. They can still connect us, still preserve fragments of humanity that would otherwise vanish. Across the globe, stories keep arriving. People see faces they cannot place. Events occur in flashes, vivid but unverified. One man recalls a festival in Rio that no one else seems to know. A woman in Mumbai dreams of streets she has never walked, yet feels compelled to follow the path in her mind. People find safety, guidance, even connection through these fragments. It is evidence that memory, even when under siege, has a persistence we cannot fully destroy. And the paradox is clear. The more the world is fractured, the more crucial it is that we hold on to fragments together. Every memory shared, every fragment recorded, every story broadcast strengthens the tenuous continuity we cling to. Alone, a memory is fragile. Together, they form a lattice, a web, a map of what the world once was, and perhaps what it can be again. We are on the edge of forgetting. The loss is nearly total. Yet, in these small acts of remembrance, the human spirit asserts itself. Some neighborhoods are forming around shared fragments. Some families, even after forgetting names, faces, and relationships, are rediscovering each other through shared stories. And here, through these broadcasts, we have created a network of continuity, a thread connecting scattered islands of memory, ensuring that humanity does not vanish completely. What happens next is uncertain. The memory loss continues. The rewrites continue. But I know this. As long as fragments survive, as long as voices speak them aloud, as long as people listen and remember, there is a chance. A chance that the world we knew can be traced, that the truth can survive in pieces, that humanity itself can endure even as everything familiar fades. I cannot promise we will recover everything. Some fragments are already gone forever. Some realities will remain fractured, parallel, impossible to reconcile. But what is left, the memories you clutch, the fragments you preserve, becomes the foundation for what follows. We cannot undo all that has been erased, but we can ensure that something survives, that something is us. So hold on to what you know. Speak it. Record it. Share it. Look for fragments in each other and recognize them when they appear. Trust the flashes, the songs, the smells, the dreams. They are more than memories. They are evidence, proof, lifelines. They are the last signal that the world existed before this collapse, and that it may exist again. I am still here. I will continue to speak, to document, to connect these fragments into a fragile map. And as long as you are listening, as long as you are remembering, The world is not entirely lost. Fragments survive. Continuity survives. Hope survives. This is the last signal radio. And as long as memory persists anywhere, humanity persists. We are the witnesses. We are the keepers. We are the last signal.